I work on the internet and I occasionally touch on the subject of
comics are weird.
which means I am bound by forces far, far beyond my control to do an episode about the recently released Amazing Spider-Man number 700. 2 weeks old and already declared the worst thing that's ever happened to Spider-Man since the last thing that happened to Spider-Man. Now, I'm not going to review the book because, frankly, I haven't read it. I can't find a copy still. I live further away from a good comic book store than I used to, and everyone's buying this thing, which means everyone else has already done a full review anyway. But since this is the internet, I, like pretty much everyone else, already knew what the big surprise, earth-shaking twist ending was a few days before it came out, so at least we can talk about cultural impact, historical significance, all that good stuff. But if you don't want to be spoiled, turn the show off now and I'll see you next week, okay? Alright then. So, in the culmination of a really long and actually pretty damn good storyline from Amazing Spider-Man head writer Dan Slott, which of course hasn't gotten the proper credit from anybody because they're still angry about One More Day retconning Spider-Man into only having dated an intermittently overwrought Cypher instead of marrying her, but we'll come back to that. The evil Dr. Octopus has used his super science to swap minds with Peter Parker, meaning that he, Otto Octavius, is now in the driver's seat of Spider-Man while Peter is stuck in Doc Ock's body, which is rapidly dying of cancer and also chronic getting your ass kicked by Spider-Man syndrome. Peter as Ock charges off to fight Ock as Peter, and he, meaning Peter Parker, dies for either the second or third time in his life, I think. I lost count. But, before breathing his last, Peter manages to psychically download all of his original memories back into his original body alongside the Doc Ock consciousness. Suddenly overwhelmed by learning just how heroic Peter Parker actually was and how similar their backgrounds were in a couple respects, Ock has a massive change of heart and decides that instead of using his new Spider-Man body for evil, he's going to continue Peter Parker's superhero career. Except he thinks he can do it better. Hence the new ongoing series, The Superior Spider-Man. You know what? I'm interested in that. A supervillain walking around in the skin of his arch-nemesis trying to both honor and surpass his legacy and basically no one else in the supporting cast knows it? That's a cool premise. Granted, it's been done a couple of times. The Thunderbolts, Kraven's Last Hunt, that really good Chameleon arc from Dan Slott's own earlier run on Amazing, but it's got lots of potential for cool stories, and if it doesn't work, it's not like it won't be easy for Marvel to eventually go, then one day Peter's memory side of the personality kicked the Doc Ock side out of the brain, and presto, Peter Parker is basically Peter Parker again, sometime down the line. I'm sorry, and again, maybe issue 700 is also terribly written. I kinda doubt it, since Slott is a really good writer 98% of the time. And yes, before you ask, I know about the Aunt May flashback. That I don't know yet, but I don't really see what's so horrifying about the basic premise. Is it a big, ridiculous, attention-grabbing stunt to boost sales? Yeah. It's a comic book. That's kind of how the medium works. Hell, back when they were still sold on magazine racks in regular stores, practically every issue was a stunt to grab attention. That's what those insane Silver Age covers were all about. Wow, what the hell's going on here? I'd better buy it and find out. I'm just not really getting how this and previous outrage-generating champion One More Day are seen as the worst or silliest Spider-Man stories. I mean, really? Worse than that time he was reborn with new powers from a cocoon? Worse than that time he grew 4 extra arms? Or that time he was a clone? Or when Doc Ock tried to marry Aunt May because she inherited a power plant or something? Or when they dragged a character who hadn't been important for years back to the forefront of the continuity for a totally forced wedding issue, so that then Marvel Editorial could get into a pencil measuring contest with Stan Lee? See, thanks largely to those lovely DVD set thingies Marvel was putting out for a while, I've pretty much read every single issue of Amazing Spider-Man published between 1963 and 2009, and then most of what's been published since, along with a solid majority of the various spin-off books over the years. I know my Spider-Man, and one of the fun things about going back and reading through all that stuff is seeing all the crazy turns and reversals the characters and their worlds go through to stay novel and interesting over decades of publication. I felt mostly the same way about One More Day, honestly. Yeah, that wasn't a good story by any reasonable means, but it was also hardly the worst thing, either plot-wise or execution-wise, that ever happened to the character. What it was, in my estimation, was simply the worst one to happen in the age of instantaneous outrage amplification that is the modern internet. Had Twitter and or Facebook existed back when the black costume first showed up, the reaction would have been pretty similar, I'd wager. And that's why I didn't stop reading the series after One More Day, and quite honestly, even though the method of getting there might have been ridiculous at best, Brand New Day and the other ongoing stories growing out of it were overall pretty good and refreshing from where I was sitting. My point is, I get preferring one status quo to another when it comes to serialized fiction, but the fact is, it's not like there's a shortage of places to see the traditional Peter Parker version of Spider-Man. In comics, games, cartoons, hell, they're gonna make at least one more of those god-awful new movies, and like I said, you know this will ultimately be temporary. I mean, if I'm not reading books about a guy who got bit by a radioactive spider and contracted superpowers instead of cancer for insane-ass plot shenanigans about devils and mind swaps and alien costumes and all manner of nonsense, why am I reading it? I'm Bob, and that's the big picture.